Alright, welcome back to the channel. Warhammer Man back in the studio with another completed commission. Today we're taking a look at a Space Wolf Veteran Assault Squad. So each of these 10 models is armed with jump packs. The majority of them have a lightning claw and storm shield, and then 3 of them also have a thunder hammer and storm shield. We do have some third-party bits on these models as well, various helmets and some of the other shoulder pads, and then of course the shields as well. And don't mind the bases. The client for this commission has their own bases ready to go. We just need to go ahead and send these out how they are, remove them, and switch them over to the already painted and textured bases from a third-party company. So that being said, try to ignore the whiteness and random paint splotches, etc. But here we have our completed Space Wolf commission. Let's take a closer look. All right, so here we have the first of our Space Wolves. We can see that these are done with various different styles and paints. So the majority of these are done actually with a zenithal highlight prime and then a custom blend contrast paint. And then we used various citadel, basically metallics and some other things like the tesseract glow technical paint to basically complete these guys. And then there's some various bits of fur, our different metallics, the eye glow, the weapon glow, the shields themselves, all done using mostly contrast and citadel metallics. So for the overall start for these guys here, we began with the armor itself. So there's a blend essentially of, first off, took tallissar blue and used some citadel median for the contrast paints to take that down to about a like 25% mix of the tallissar blue, so it's not as strong, and then went ahead and mixed it with the Space Wolf blue contrast paint, and then finally some of the apothecary white contrast paint, essentially in like each even portions, and then went ahead and went over the entire zenithal painted models with that blend. And then the next step after doing that, going through, we basically just went back through with a lighter kind of gray color and essentially did some edge highlights. I believe this was actually a corax white for the edge highlights on these. And then the next step was to go through and just use our black templar for the little bits behind the legs and sort of like flexible bits in between the armor panels. And then after completing that, the next step was to just go through and start picking out some of the hard to reach details. So we went through next for the hard to reach details and essentially covered most of those in the corax white as well. Anything that was going to get a contrast paint over top of it. And then obviously the metallics also. So once we had all those steps done, had the gold and silver done as well, and then all the corax white, went through with various contrast paints like skeleton horde for the bones and the teeth, and then also went through for the shoulder pads themselves. So for the yellow, we used the iyanden yellow, and then for the red bits on the shoulder pads as well, I used our contrast Blood Angels red, and then finally the black Templar for the little wolf heads. And many of the models have various wolf pelts and tails as well. The key here was to essentially use more of a brown color as opposed to a gray to make sure that it contrasted well with the actual armor itself. So in this case, we have used the snakebite leather and then went through and done a little bit of extra darker areas and lighter areas. So like for the little wolf tails that we have hanging down from his waist there, we started off with the skeleton horde and then did about the middle portion of them from top to bottom with the snakebite leather, and then finally came in at the lowest parts with the templar black. So basically got like the kind of light to dark contrast. And then our next step was to go through and do all of the various gold bits. So once all the gold was done, went through and just did a Reikland fleshade over top that, and then did an edge highlight on the gold as well. And then after that, went through and did some other various details, such as the silver. That is a leadbelcher silver with a just a nice coat of nuln oil wash over top of that. So now we had all the metallics done after we did some edge highlights on those. So we've worked out most of the details at this point in time, went ahead and worked on the shields after that. So the shields were done in a similar fashion to the shoulder pads. Went ahead and did an iyanden yellow coat on those and made sure that they were positioned so that we would get the darker edges from the contrast paint running towards them. And then of course went back through and just did a little bit of the black templar over the actual wolf heads themselves and got a very nice look on those. The little bandana bits hanging around their legs and various bits on their shoulder pads that are red, we did with the blood angels red on those, and that completed the majority of our colors. So the next step was to do the actual lightning claws themselves, again with a nice coat of corax white, and then our tesseract green, tesseract glow rather, green for the kind of glow look there, and then that led to that kind of a bright glowing look. And again, we picked a color that would specifically contrast nicely with the model and something brighter than everything else on the model to make sure that it stood out. And we went out of our way to pose each of these models slightly different so that no two would be the same. And there's combination of bodies and shoulder pads and everything. So just made sure that no two looked the same when completed and got the overall nice look. Now the heads were all painted separately, so we put those on a head sprue, as I like to refer to them. All facing the same way. Went through and did all the heads with some various blending. Again, those are 3D printed bits for the heads. And I made sure to pick out the teeth with a nice corax white, and then did the eyes with a bright corax white, and then went back through with our same blood angels red, and then just a slight brighter kind of orange color to make sure that they glow. And then after that, we have our thunder hammers. So for the handles of the thunder hammers, went ahead and did a nice red on them. And then finally did the actual thunder hammer again with the silver and gold, and then made sure to pick a little bit to have glowing on the thunder hammers as well. So in this case, went ahead and just painted in like the little charge points on the thunder hammer with a white, and then went back through with our tesseract glow, and then just put a tiny little dot of white on the end to show where the energy was coming from. And here's a slightly different style of thunder hammer. So for this one, we picked a little bit of a portion of the hammer itself to actually be glowing. Again, we see the red throughout. And then finally, we take a look at the thrusters of the backpack. So we did a various little like wet blend technique and wanted to make sure that there is a strong contrast between each of the colors, between the darkest blue or black color to the next color blue, and then of course the white all the way down in the thrusters. So when you look at it, we see a contrast from very dark to very light, and that's what gives us that glowing kind of look to make it look like the thrusters are actually glowing and emitting some hot flames. And that's it for these Space Wolves here. So we can see we have a combination of primarily contrast paints, but some metallics as well. And when they're all said and done, they came out very nicely. Have some cool effects for the actual thrusters, cool effects for the shield, and then nice looking yellow, nice looking pelts, and all the different various effects here. Make sure the heads themselves are a little lighter than the rest of the model, so it draws our attention there. And then make sure that the small little glowing portions, either the thunder hammers or lightning claws, stand out as the brightest portions of the models. So that's it for today. That is our Space Wolf completed commission using our primarily contrast paints with some of the Citadel metallics as well. I've got all kinds of technical contrast paint and metallic techniques in there and achieved a very nice look. Again, please ignore the bases as they will be transferred over to some nicely completed bases for the client to match the rest of his army. But overall, very happy with how these came out. I know my client was as well. Again, another returning happy customer of Warhammer Man Studios. Of course, we are a commission-based studio and do plenty of commissions. There's always a queue, but we work through it pretty quickly, but never compromise the quality of the paint scheme. So if you like these models here, if you have any questions about the paint colors or techniques that were used, please leave them down below. I always list the paints and order and different techniques that were used down in the description, as well as various other how-to videos demonstrating exactly how we've done these various styles. So if you're interested in doing armor like this or overall getting models like this, if you're interested in the third-party bits such as the helmets or shoulder pads or anything, I'd be glad to let you know about those as well. But that is it for today's commission. Our Warhammer 40,000 Space Wolf veterans with storm shields and a mix of lightning claw and thunderhammer, and of course jump packs so that they can get to their opponents and lay the smack down. So that's it for today. If you did enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe for Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team, Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, and warcry content as well. Everything from showing off our painted commissions as they leave the studio to, of course, all kinds of reactions, reviews, unboxings, and then the plenty of tutorials on how to create custom bases or conversions. Of course, painting tutorials, lighting, and magnetization as well. That's it for today, Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.